morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is my great pleasure, my great honor to welcome you to this final webinar in our series, our True Africa University, MIT Center for International Studies and MIT Africa series on sustainable development in Africa. This is a very special session for me and for many others who have been waiting for this moment. Actually, for more than a year, because today's session was, many people think it was supposed to happen last week and we rescheduled it, but it was actually supposed to take place last year in 2022. And the reason I'm saying I have to curb my enthusiasm is I've been looking forward to this conversation for a very long time. I am a big fan and friend and supporter and admirer of Oby Ezekwesili. She is an inspiration for so many of us Africans who really want a new course for the continent. Today's conversation is about leadership and the future leadership that will hopefully steer Africa in a new direction. But Oby Ezekwesili, for those who don't know her, is a former vice president for the World Bank's Africa region. She was very well known as a minister of education in Nigeria. She was a presidential candidate herself. She actually founded the Bring Back Our Girls movement that Michelle Obama ended up endorsing. She's also the founder of Fixed Politics Initiative, of Human Capital Africa. So you see where I'm going with all this. Oby is very much focused on the human potential and how Africans, young Africans, can actually write a new chapter for the continent. And with great pride, I would like to welcome Oby Ezekwesili for this webinar. Oby, you've got the floor.
Hello, what a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be on this podium. I have looked forward to keeping my promise to definitely have this conversation, because I'm a conversation person. So we'll go quickly since we have limited time. But Claude, you know that you're one of my fave people, and I'm quite always happy to see you breaking new grounds, doing your best to intellectually position the continent. And I thank Ari and all the members of the team who are part of this seminar today, the webinar today, rather. So I'll be talking about what can Africa's future leaders do to transform the continent. And I'll be speaking on this from both a theoretical as well as a practice framework. The reason being that I absolutely believe in evidence-based approach in finding solutions to problems. And so coming to a place where I can speak credibly about the problems of leadership on our continent required my not just having been trained in policy at the Kennedy School, but it comes from a place of having had the opportunity to lead through serving and then to also observe leadership across the spectrum of private sector, public sector, civil society, and across nations and communities. So I start the presentation, go to the next slide, where you see me sort of providing a context to really a story of fixing Africa's leadership that takes all of my time these days. Africa, on every indicator of development compared to other continents of the world. And one or too many indicators exist, which when you look at, you see within which you find Africa, always often at the lower rungs or the lowest rung of most what I call league tables, whether they are economic or social, political stability-related indicators, or they are governance indicators. However you invert these, and you're looking at things like destabilization and challenges, then you find Africa at the top. And this has to correct, this has to be corrected. And one thing that you would see in my presentation is that leadership is at the core of what stands as what the things that stand as barriers, or the barriers to getting a reversal of the current data around the performance of our continent. So you look at the HDI ranking as produced by the UN system, the UNDP more specifically, and you can see that map, and that map shows you that Africa is really at the lowest rank in terms of the average human development ranking. When you look at what makes up this ranking, it's about income per capita, it's about life expectancy, it's about school completion rate, and it's also, generally about the state of health, education, income, and state effectiveness. And you see this low performance. Then you see the poverty ranking, and what you see right there is how most of the countries that represent the highest share of the world's population living in extreme poverty are in Africa. And my country, Nigeria, just happens to be leading, followed by DRC, and these are large population countries on the continent. And data does show, what World Bank data showed before the global pandemic, COVID pandemic, that by the year 2030, when most of the world has forgotten about extreme poverty, more than 90% of the remaining world's poor people would be in Africa. And so it would be the poverty continent, the continent where poverty remains. Move to the next slide, please. So in that context, the natural question is, why is it that for a continent that has all the factors that can lead to growth, it just hasn't managed to grow, and therefore tackle poverty, and therefore, of course, before tackling poverty, and therefore, build the human capabilities, the human development that would enable poverty as a critical factor for productivity and competitiveness of nations. It is because there is this problem of leadership. So for me, leadership is significant. And as a matter of fact, there are many times when people trained in the technical business of policymaking never really paid attention to leadership. I remember my days working with Jeff. One of the things that we always looked at, and it was reluctant. It took a while before the policy model began to take in the issues of institutions. It captured the concept of leadership within institutions, and the institutional factors were not really easy to build into the model of growth that everyone sort of bandied around in those 80s and 90s and early 90s. But we learned the hard way to saying that the institutional context within which the process of nation building happened really can determine how fast the process of development can occur. And so I say on this slide that everything rises and falls on leadership, as spoken by John X. Maxwell, a leadership expert. And then I talk about, Jeffrey Sachs, thank you very much for helping me. Then Margaret Mead talks about, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So what I normally do is to connect the concept of leadership to the concept of citizens' leadership. Move to the next slide, please. So I have observed the matter of growth and done a walk around, growth drivers. And I have come to a place where I say that for me, there is a trinity of growth and development where I sort of think of the framework for economic growth as being around one, having sound policies, two, having strong institutions, three, having effective and efficient prioritization of investment in the public goods and services that private sector needs in order to be the productive and competitive engine of an economy, the basic services that citizens need in order to be productive actors within the economy and in fact be competitive. So these troika of actions, of factors that you need for economic growth for me. I keep saying that if you analyze them further, and we talked about sound policies, you find that there is a major role beyond the technical. There is the technical part of it where sound policies are, of course, anchored on evidence-based analytical approaches. But those evidence-based analytical approaches require leadership. And then strong institutions. I normally say that the simple definition of institution is, of course, the way a people do their things. And frankly, the way people do their things often framed in the values that the people subscribe to collectively. And so within strong institutions, you decompose it and find leadership of the process of institutions building. And I see a lot of the times people struggling with the artificial construct of a dichotomy between the role of individuals and the role of systems and structures. And then the third one is that effective and efficient prioritization requires is a degree of leadership of the process of determining prioritization in society. And when you look at economies that have grown, you can bring everything that they did, whether you're looking at a Singapore, you're looking at a South Korea, I'm using these countries because they are contemporaries of a country like mine, Nigeria, similarly colonized by Great Britain, and then through the journey of the checkered journey of finding democracy, and then we're moving on to self-governance. And yet, when you've seen how they have diverged in performance, when compared to Nigeria or other contemporaries within the continent of Africa. And so when you try to classify everything that they have done, you would find that those actions they have taken come around these three factors of the soundness of policies, whether they be macroeconomic policies or structural policies or institutional or systemic, sectoral policies. Sound policies drive growth. Strong institutions enable growth. Effective investment, efficient investment, investing in the right things that deliver the goods and services that private sector and citizens need and enable and in fact accelerate growth. So this trinity of growth and development there's no exceptionalism to it. Whether it is the countries of Europe, the countries of the Americas, the countries of Asia, we see that countries go through these three things and generate growth. So the day our continent is able to find its part toward a consistency in generating these three factors, that's when growth. And I'm not saying that it is so formulaic and that it guarantees anything, but it fundamentally, these are necessary conditions. They may not be entirely sufficient because there may be other things outside of this model of the troika of things that I have laid out here, but they would not be as significant as pretending that you can get to growth without any of these three things working together. Move to the next slide, please. And so if in all of those three things, a consistent phenomenon that you have to address is the matter of the quality of leadership that's enabling the emergence of sound policies that's leading the process of building the dynamic, vibrant institutions that are anchored on the rule of law and therefore bring the measure of direction and credibility and predictability at a certain degree of the incentive and the sanctions regime within a society, therefore signaling what would be rewarded and what would be punished in a coherent and consistent way. And you also know that you need those kinds of, the kind of leadership that determines priorities in the good kind of way. What kind of leaders would these people be? What would be the benchmark of these kinds of leaders? And I call them, in fact, now have moved from transformational future to transcendental, future African leadership. And I look at those leaders as leaders that must have three inextricable criteria that they tick the boxes for. They must be leaders that have character. Character is non-negotiable. Competence. They must be trained in that way where their skills, their competencies, their cognition in understanding issues and in being able to use the competence that they have gained across spectrum of knowledge would support their leadership process. And they have to be people with capacity to mobilize group resource, bring all the factors together that would lead to a society solving its problem. And I normally say that character, competence, capacity, these are the three things for me that any individual that I want to have solve a problem for me, whether it's problem solving at a family level, community level, state level, in the private sector, public sector, I need to find this in them. I need to find this in these individuals, because when I find this in my policymakers, I know that they would have the character, the competence, the capacity to be driven by the critical processes for sound policy, for putting forward policy choices that ultimately lead to the nearest best solution for us, if not the best. And then I normally say that for character, it is non-negotiable, because even if you had competence and capacity and you're lacking of character, which is the major reason that our public sector, our public space is governed by the people who make choices that compromise the common good of society. It's the absence of character as a non-negotiable factor or criterion that they must have that leads to this problem. And then of course with the capacity, you can have leaders who weaken at the emergence of problems. Leaders must have the resilience to tackle the toughest of issues. They have to have the capacity to make the toughest of choices. They cannot, run from challenges because it's not politically expedient for them to make those decisions. They must have the capacity to take the risks that are necessary and to embrace opportunities, be entirely committed to innovation and questioning the status quo and just moving society in a direction that is unknown, but very, very certainly in ways that are deliberative and in ways that are intentional. Please move to the next slide. Excuse me. And so all of these that I have said led me to a place where I could understand why we were struggling as a continent, because I use the troika on growth to assess various countries and the landscape of governance, and it falls short in majority of the countries on that continent. Then I use the three criteria of leadership to assess our political leaders across the spaces of, especially the political space, and they fall short. And so you find that, oh dear, we are stuck. We are stuck because if it is important, if it is critical that we should have this mix of things to move us toward growth, then, and we don't have them, then it means we must ask ourselves what to do. What to do cannot be anecdotal. What to do has to be understood within a framework. And so I had to walk back from to realizing that, okay, we often think that governance is the problem. So we try to do projects and programs of accountability, transparency after governments have been formed. But from my analysis, after governments have been formed, you have a tough time getting anyone to listen to what you want to achieve. The reason is that what governance would look like was already determined upstream at the politics stage. So our lack of interest in engaging the politics stage has been a costly decision. It's been a costly attitude of those of us who care about our continent. We ignore the politics. So the politics is already rigged to produce the kind of governance that we ultimately see. The governance that is without sound policies, without the right institutions, without the right priorities of investment. Okay, so upon realizing that the importance of the politics, I had to analyze the politics through a framework. And so I decided to use the market competition model as my framework for doing, my theoretical framework for doing so. And so in politics, I decided to see politics as a basic good, as a basic service. And so it would have a market in that case. If it does have a market, then it would have a supply side, a demand side, and it would have a regulatory side to it. And by building this model, I'm able to look at each country's democracy and politics and see whether indeed this triangular, what I call my triangular pillars of democracy, are functioning in a way that delivers the outcomes of a politics that can result in my troika of what it takes to get to growth, and my basic growth driver of competent, capable, and character-based leadership. And so, if you see, at the base, I've got value-based political class. That's what I need. I need to have value-based political class, because the class I currently have is not value-based most of the time. And even if a few are, they are too negligible to be of any impact. And then I have to have an empowered and engaged electorate as on the demand side. And then I must have a regulatory context in my politics that allows the action, the interaction between the demand side and the supply side to lead to democratic outcomes that can guarantee me the kind of quality of governance that I am looking for through this new type of politics. Move to the next slide, please. So in order to get to that supply side, as you can see, today's focus for us in fixing politics to get me to where I want to get to on the continent is the matter of building new leadership. So value-based political class, the new leaders that will do all of these things that sound highfalutin, but they are really fundamental to the development of our continent. So to solve the value-based political class problem, the supply side problem, I have to disrupt the existing supply pipeline. I have to contest the space of public leadership with them. Basically, not I mean, we have to basically find a new supply pipeline that contests the space of public leadership, because it's also a supply issue. And right now, the only supply pipeline is a pipeline that supplies the kind of leaders that do not tick the boxes of character, competence, and capacity most of the time. So we then had to establish, to do so, we established an unconventional school of politics, policy, and governance, which attracts and develops and produces a new generation of political leaders, the leaders that will listen and serve a new class of citizens that might demand side in that triangular pillar, the framework of triangular pillars of democracy showed you. So these are new class of citizens who know their rights, who have not abdicated their responsibility, and hoping that somehow their country will develop on the back of a political class that has not shown any such interest, predictably. Emerge on a large scale, a new set of public service leaders that are trained on a customized curriculum on ethical politics, policy, and governance, so that they can offer a new dominant political culture that will subordinate their personal interests to the collective welfare of the citizens of the African continent. And that's because the analysis in this, my approach, shows that the reason that the political outcomes in our democracies, in our elections, continue to be dismal and disappointing is that there is a dominant political culture today that subordinates the common good to the personal and narrow interests of the political class. And so the political class has basically upstaged everyone, and they are the beginning and the end of the current practice of democracy that we have. So the kinds of outcomes that we're getting out of this: improved quality of candidates, increased government effectiveness and effective control of corruption, political stability, and then adequate security for Africa, availability of quality and effective generational leadership at every stratum and arm of government, and the availability of enlightened, well-informed, and seasoned professionals in the public service, in the public service of our country. So basically, the School of Politics, Policy, and Governance is our instrument for innovating public leadership. If we can innovate financial services on our continent, if we can innovate, telecommunication on our continent, if we can innovate anything on our continent, the most important thing for us to innovate now is actually Africa's public leadership. If we don't innovate Africa's public leadership, we would only have marginal improvements in the things we do. And that's because government is the enabler of every other possibilities within. It can determine how far a country performs, mostly. So the SPPG, the community SPPG, and the Thought Leadership Hub is our approach for ensuring that the kind of leaders that we are producing are leaders that I can vote for, that you can vote for. Because when we tick them, when we tick the boxes for each of them, when we assess each of them on the 3 criteria that are important for transcendental leadership, that is competent, that is capable, that is ethical, and does not subordinate and subvert the common good, they would pass those tests. And so we don't guarantee that there would not be issues. There would be issues, but it would not be the kind of entrenched political culture of subversion that we currently have, which is what is the greatest obstacle to Africa achieving good governance. Move to the next slide, please. So this is basically telling you what I already said. So we can move to the next slide. The School of Politics, Policy and Governance. And this is not something we're planning to do. It's something that we already are doing. It's an unconventional curriculum. It is actually a pedagogical structure that takes the problems in each of the countries and the solutions to those problems, turns them into class models, and then teaches them. So that if I took a Claude and I took the problems of Togo and the solutions to the problems of Togo, ranging from the key critical sectors that hold Togo back from growth, and the critical sectors that are important for Togo's growth. And I teach him all of these with my 140 topics, over a period of 10 months. I am ready to vote for Claude, because I know that if Claude gets into political office, whether as a legislator or as an executive, he will be making the right kinds of calls on policies, on institutions building, on priorities that governments and private sector would need to invest on, so that I can achieve growth. And the reason that growth is important is that without growth, I cannot get to poverty reduction. Without growth, I cannot build a prosperous Africa. So this is basically telling you the program of the SPPG. It's really a well-considered program. We have 94 faculty members drawn from some of the best schools around the world, including also practitioners and then experts. So we have 94 of them. We have teachers coming out of Harvard, out of Yale, out of Sussex, and Hetty School in Germany. There are just a number of schools that are part of our faculty. They are honorary faculty, just doing this for Africa. And we have some of the high-profile people who have been through the process of governance and leadership, also bringing that angle to the program. And it's for 10 months. We have graduated already. Move to the next slide, please. We have graduated already, 160 people in 2021. That was our pioneer class of 2021. And then in 2022, we graduated 133. Our strategy is actually to just organically grow, because what we want to get to is a maximum class of 500 annually for each of the countries where we're raising these new leaders that will contest the political space with the existing political class. And so the class of 2023 is in session. There are about 200 plus of them who likely will graduate at the end, 180 thereabouts, because our standards are very stringent. We really don't want to repeat the pattern of leadership failure with anyone who goes through our school. Go to the next slide, please. So just some success stories of future African leaders. So some of you may know Olusegun Onígbìndé, who is really one of my best mentees. I call him in fact, his son. He's the CEO of Budget, innovated the idea of citizens' knowledge of public budget and using technology and data as the drivers for this. Is just amazing. The whole open data initiative and everything that Shehu does is represents for me one of the leading lights of his generation on our continent. I'm really excited about his work. He's also a member of the Fixed Politics community. He teaches at the SPPG, the School of Politics, Policy and Governance. Move to the next slide, please. How am I doing with time? Oh my God. Okay, I'm supposed to stop. Oh my God, I've eaten the time. Claude.
Yes, so we can maybe just quickly take 10-15 seconds to go through this list of future leaders and then
okay,
move into
all
Q&A.
right. And then Vanessa, they're going to get the presentation. So Vanessa Nakate of Uganda, you've got Inya Boyeji, look at the work that young Vanessa is doing around climate. So these are the faces of leadership in their own generation. Inya Boyeji built. It has been part of the building of 2 unicorns in the tech space. Move to the next slide, please. Yemi Adamolekun, a great activist who has really pushed the frontiers for citizens' engagement through Enough is Enough, mobilized the young generation. Sangudel is just amazing in that whole space of innovation around economic development, around human development, health. Sangu is actually a member of the advisory board of the Human Capital Africa, which I founded in order to tackle the challenges that we have around foundational literacy and numeracy that is killing a lot of the prospects of 9 out of every 10 of African children by the age of 10 who do not have proficiency in literacy and numeracy, building block for the future. I think the next slide, signs me out. So let's see. Okay, Miriam Jamé of Senegal. Many of you know the work that she's doing in the tech space, trying to get millions of our children, the girls, the importance of girls in tech. Move to the next slide. We of these 5 people that I have spoken about, we need exponential rate of growth of these ones. Because for us to get to the kind of development we need to be very fast. So scale for us and speed matter on this journey toward transforming Africa. And I have there 3 of the books that I think you would find interesting to read. Thank you very much, Claude. I'm sorry that I lost track of time.
Well, thank you, Oby. We can keep going forever. I will only ask you one question, and those of you who want to find out more, they can go into your Twitter feed where you have more than 1.4 million followers, and there's a lot of opinions there as well. I will only ask one question before I hand it over to Victory, and this is the first question from one of our attendees who wanted to know if the candidates that go through SPPG are supported to run for political elections.
Yes, they are. And as a matter of fact, I missed out a slide in the slide presentation because in the 2023 election, 55 of our graduates contested for political party tickets across various parties. 55 contested. 9 of them, 4 women and 5 men, were successful. So they became candidates in the 2023 election. None of them won. I think 2 of them are in court. But the most important thing happened for us, which is that what we designed is actually tested and it is working. And so we're excited about that. Some of our graduates would, of course, not run for office. They would likely work, not be politicians, but work in the public sector. And that's also good.
Wonderful. Thank you, Oby. Victory, please introduce yourself and ask your question, which will be actually the final question of this webinar.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for that amazing talk. I was frantically taking notes because every single thing you said was insightful. I really loved how you had this interplay between economics and education and politics that I'd never really seen before. But hi, everyone. My name is Victory. I'm a current second-year undergrad at MIT. And the question that I'll quickly ask is kind of coming from the perspective of the diaspora, because a lot of people on this talk are not necessarily within Africa. And you also had that experience where you were abroad for a while before like going fully back into the Nigerian political system. So my biggest question, which is sort of in two parts, is how was transitioning from being in the diaspora into the Nigerian political system like for you? What was your biggest shock? Like what was the biggest thing that like held you back? And then also how were your experiences from working with Jeff, from working at Harvard and like, the Institute of Development? How did that help you propel you forward back into the system?
Yeah. So in terms of my shock when I went into government from the Kennedy School, it was that whatever I thought was wrong, it was not in any way compared to the scale of what I found. I, for example, found that the public service that I knew tangentially, of course, but we all did know it because there were enough literature to enable us know that Nigeria's public service was one of the top-ranked public services on the continent. In fact, not just on the continent, in the Commonwealth in those days, that it had fallen apart, and that most of Africa's public service, but that is the civil service, the public service on a larger scale, no longer pay attention to the dictates of analysis and empirical, analysis and just generating the research that would underpin policy choices, but that a lot of it was now transaction, and that transaction was really driving the public service, and that was the key reason why the poor deployment of resources across Africa, where people would say, of all these commodities that Africa gets so much rent from annually, what does it do with it? So the shock for me was incredible. And that wasn't a shock. The second thing that I'm saying now, it wasn't a shock. I didn't expect that people were going to say, oh, wow, how wonderful, you've come from abroad, you've come to come and help. No, they didn't think it that way. They actually, one of the times that I went before the parliament, the legislature in Nigeria, it was the chairman of the committee was angry at the reform that I was driving to make public procurement transparent, competitive, and up to the, consistent with global standards. And he said to me, Oby, when do you go back to Harvard? He didn't want me to be around. He wanted me to go back to where I had come from. Then to your question on the transition from being at the Kennedy School, working with Jeff, and then coming into the country, working in government, I think that there's nothing more important for anyone who's going to go work in government. It doesn't matter what field of learning that you've had in the past. You do need to go to policy school. Policy school really does prepare you, and I was very well prepared by virtue of my time spent at the Kennedy School. So besides having been a chartered accountant, being in Deloitte and done financial services work, but it took going to the Kennedy School and really understanding case study as a method of learning and being armed with the tools of analysis. You can't go to public service. If you go to public service without an analytical anchor, you're just going to go and be one of the numbers, one of these people still holding the public service in the very mediocre performance that it is operating at. So that helped me a lot. So I am the champion for evidence-based policy making across the, in government, in all the work that I did, because I I not only then did the work on reforming the public procurement, I became the one who worked with TEAM to establish the Nigerian Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, then became Minister of Soil Minerals, and then became Minister of Education. If you looked at all of the assignments I did, at the heart of it are these tools of analysis, empirical and analytical evidence as the backbone for making the right kinds of policy choices. The second thing that you see in the work that I did by virtue of that training from where I'd come is the matter of codification towards institutions building. So in all my work, they ended up with one legislation, one law, the Public Procurement Act is from the work that I did with teams. The NEITI Act is from the work that I did with teams. The Nigerian Geological Survey Agency Act is from that work. The then new Minerals Act, an act that was widely acclaimed around the world as being one of the best minerals acts that came out of Africa, especially. It was from that work. The Mining Cadastral Office as an institutional way that removed the power of a minister to just discretionarily award licenses for mining. It came from the work, so institutions building became a major part of what my time in government was about. And then, of course, making quality choices in terms of the kinds of investments that are necessary. So we look at the public expenditure review around what we were investing in education. I said to them that we were not investing in education. We were basically budgeting for education. So investing in education means using analysis as a basis for identifying through research the things which when you invest on, you can get higher degree of learning outcomes. So for example, the matter of the quality of the teachers and the methods of teaching became a key part of the kind of reforms that I was interested in. So your preparation while you're studying abroad, you have to really enjoy it, because you know that you're getting the best of tools that would support a new way of thinking and a new way of doing things when you return. And that's not to say that you won't meet people who already have those ideas, but at least you would come with fresh eyes and be able to push some really new grounds and break new grounds.
Well, thank you so much, Oby, for all of this. We could keep going forever. This is such a beautiful way to end the 2022 webinar series that we've been doing through Africa University with MIT Center for International Studies and the MIT Africa program. We started in 2021, we continued in 2022. We're continuing this year, and we hope to see you next year, 2024. As a reminder, I really just wanted to tell you that the MIT Center for International Studies aims to support and promote international research and education at MIT. We produce research that creatively addresses global issues while helping to educate the next generation of global citizens. Visit cis.mit.edu to learn more. The MIT Africa program, which is based at the MIT Center for International Studies, empowers MIT students and faculty to advance knowledge and solve the world's great challenges by connecting them with leading researchers, companies, and other partners in African countries. For more information, visit misti.mit.edu. And finally, True Africa University, which was created by Africans for Africa, aims to become a Pan-African learning community that is committed to accelerating Africa's sustainable development by mobilizing a global network of academic, industrial, and institutional partners. With that, I want to thank specifically Michelle English for making this series so seamless across the years, Ari Jakubowicz, Sabina Van Mel, Amanda So, and François-Xavier Uvelon from the True Africa University team. So thank you, Oby. Thank you, Victory. Thank you all. We hope to see you next year, March 2024, for the next season. God bless. Take you all everywhere you go. And again, thank you for your inspiring words. See you next year.